You are listening to the e-flux podcast.
Hello and welcome to the e-flux podcast. My name is Andreas and I'm the editorial assistant on e-flux Journal. I'm incredibly honored to be joined today by Franco Bifo Berardi, founder of the famous Radio Alice in Bologna and an important figure in the Italian Autonomia movement. He's a writer, a media theorist, and a social activist. Most recently, his books are Breathing, Chaos and Poetry on Semiotexte, and even more recently, The Second Coming, out on Polity Press this year. Longtime contributor to e-flux Journal, Bifo has contributed Sensitive Consciousness and Time Against the Transhumanist Utopia in issue 98, and just last month, the text Game Over in issue 100 of e-flux Journal. So Bifo, thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure
to
be here.
Oh. So I thought we could start with the Q&A that you did at Topos the other night, where you were launching your book, Breathing, Chaos and Poetry. And you mentioned the term democracy for you is more of a methodology, or you think about it like a methodology.
Well, democracy is a very ambiguous word, first of all. It's difficult to understand what is the demos, what is the grazia, the strength. But the real problem is that everybody in the last 100 years has used the word democracy as if it was a value, as if it was the goal of political action. It is not. Democracy is a methodology of political action. So it's meaningless, the rhetoric of re-establishing democracy. If democracy means the rule of the majority of people, which is at the end the most understandable meaning of that word, if democracy is this, then in the year 1933, democracy in Germany was Adolf Hitler. Right. And in the year 2016, democracy in the United Kingdom is Brexit. So, you see, if we want define and find out a strategy, a political strategy for the future, we cannot think that the problem is to re-establish democracy. Mm-hmm. We have to establish something of much more concrete than democracy.
Right.
The welfare of people, freedom in daily life, redistribution of wealth, the possibility of having public education, a public health system, the possibility of living well.
This is the goal. Reduction of work.
Yeah. Democracy may be the methodology for obtaining these aims, not the aim itself.
Right. Well, speaking of this condition of both Brexit and everything from Trump to the rise of the right wing, basically in every corner of the world, a term that you've been using a lot in your recent writing is chaos. And specifically a chaos that you describe that doesn't exist outside of our own consciousness, outside of our social consciousness, outside of the general intellect. Could you speak to how you're using this term chaos?
Well, the word chaos does not refer to an ontological entity. It's not something that exists in nature or in social relationships. No, chaos is in the human brain. Chaos is the deformity, the divergence, the incommensurability in the relation between the surrounding world and the brain which elaborates the surrounding world. So nowadays, chaos means that the political rule, the ethical rule that we have inherited from modernity has grown unable to deal with the acceleration of the infosphere. I mean, too fast. When the world is going too fast for our brain, at that point we can speak of chaos. But actually, it's not the world that becomes too fast, it's the information about the world. Right. So someone like the German-Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han speaks of a shitstorm. What is the shitstorm? Is the effect of the acceleration of the infosphere, too much information that becomes too many nervous stimulation. Our nervous system is stimulated by an incredibly high and fast flow of stimuli. And at that point, our brain becomes unable to criticize, to critically understand the situation in which we are. So the present political craziness is when I say political craziness, I'm not metaphorizing. It's not a metaphor. Right. I am speaking in a very descriptive way. I describe a situation in which rationality is over, has grown unable to elaborate the excessive velocity and the excessive the excess of stimulation. This is the point. This is chaos. And our problem is not fight against chaos.
Right.
Fighting against chaos means nothing, because chaos is nourished, is reinforced by fight, by war. Those who fight against chaos will lose, because chaos feeds on war. So war against terrorism, war against drugs, war against this and against that. This is stupid. It's the experience of the last 20 or 30 years.
Right.
Waging war against chaos is useless and dangerous. We have to elaborate a new rhythm of our brain, a new rhythm of our social relation, in order to be able to how can I say, to demultiply the velocity of chaos. That's an interesting problem. How can you deal with the excess of stimulation? It's a problem for the human brain. A very interesting subject of contemporary philosopher, an emerging trend in contemporary philosophy is neuroplasticity, is the idea that our brain is not only a natural thing, is also a cultural thing that redefines itself in relation with the environment. The redefinition of the rhythm and the modalities of the brain, this is the real issue of the future, I guess.
Well, elsewhere you've written, at least in the way I'm thinking about chaos and you're talking about it, it connects very closely with the global automaton that you've described elsewhere. Right? It's the sort of the final trend. If the entire 20th century was a trend towards abstraction and the development of abstraction as a tool for making our realities unseeable and visibilized and immaterialized, you've written that a way to deal with the global automaton, the only way to deal, is to make friends with it. And by making friends with it, you mean to sabotage it and to rework it. So you've also sort of talked about poetry and sort of the place of poetry being between language, capital, and possibility. right? So I wonder how you oppose poetry to chaos. How do you see it being a tool against the chaotic global automaton that we're faced with?
First of all, we are facing two different trends in the present age. Not only different, but absolutely contradictory, absolutely diverging. One is chaos. Chaos in the social mind, chaos in social relations, chaos in the political organization of the community, chaos in the brain, chaos in the soul, the sense of panic, of despair, chaos, dementia, which means chaos of the brain. The other trend is the creation of the automaton,
right.
The perfect, logical, digital automaton that is created in the connection between extraction of data from daily life and insertion of intelligent automatisms in daily life. This morning I was walking in Green Park in Brooklyn, and I was met by a young girl who asked me, "Do you want to take part in a Google experiment that we are doing these days?" Strange things happen in my life.
She asked the right person. Yeah.
She had a strange gadget in her hands, and she told me, "If you agree, I give you a bonus of $5 that you can spend in Starbucks or something like that. And I take some picture of you and I make some question to you in order to prepare a system of facial recognition."
Right.
Oh, wow. I asked more. I wanted to understand. And at the end, I told, I prefer not to contribute to this criminal activity that you are obliged to do because I understand that you need a salary. But you see, facial recognition, for example, and this kind of technical transformation of the daily environment are aimed to the creation of a sort of automaton, of cognitive automaton, which is able to interact with us in every moment of the day in such a way that we are obliged, not by political repression, but by language, by the interpretation of science, by the creation of linguistic automatisms in such a way that the body, the real body, the concrete body, the concrete brain is totally demented and crazy, but the interaction is perfectly rational, perfectly functional, producing capital, accumulating capital, and so on. This double process, the spread of dementia, the spread of angst and of panic, and simultaneously the organization of a grid of perfect organization, of perfect structuration of daily life and of daily language is, in my opinion, the process we have entered now. This is painful. This is terribly painful because we have the impression that everything is working, and actually everything is working. Trains are on time, we pay the rent, the bank is taking money from our salary, and so on. Perfect. Everything is perfect. accept life, accept the soul, accept the body, accept our ability to be happy.
Right.
We are totally destroyed from a psychological point of view, also from a physical point of view, by the imposition, by the construction of this functional machine. It's a problem of rhythm, very much. The rhythm of the surrounding world is more and more intolerable for the body and for the brain. Particularly for the brain. It's our brain which has grown unable to criticize, to critically interpret, to creatively produce solutions for our life and so on. And how can you act on the brain? In many ways, I know, for instance, psychiatrists and psychoanalysts are doing their job, but my point of view is that the main, the most important activity that we should be able to elaborate is the ability to find a new rhythm in the relation between body, soul, and the infosphere. Rhythm, the problem of rhythm is a poetical problem. When I say poetical, I think to the etymology of that word. Mm-hmm. Poesis is creation, but is poiein in Greek means building the world, creating the world. And the world actually is not external to our mind. It's the product of the projection of our mind. So on one side, our mind is then dimensional, is crazy, is chaotic. On the other side, our mind is trapped in a sort of automaton. Poetry is the ability to reconstruct our autonomy, which is first of all an autonomy of the rhythm of our language, of our daily life. This is why I say that the therapy in the present situation is a poetical therapy, not in a literary sense, but in a rhythmic and psychotherapeutic sense. I think that psychotherapy is no more a strange thing for crazy people. Psychotherapy is a form of politics, the new form of politics.
Totally. Well, you asked in 2011 in the essay you wrote for Are You Working Too Much? Cognitarian Subjectivation. You asked, and this is 3 years after the 2008 crash, during Occupy, and you said, and I would like to ask whether a process of autonomous collective self-definition is possible in the present age. And it seems to me like in the years since then, and of course we've passed through 2016 and 17, and now it's 10 years since Occupy, this process you describe of breathing is quite literally that, right? And so the collective mind is very much immaterialized and extracted from and has things put into it. But as you say very often, it's still confined to the body, to the corporeal. And breathing is this form of poetics. Can you talk about how you used to mean breathing as a political project?
Well, in 2011, in the year of Occupy, in the years of Occupy, because of 2009, Occupy London, 2010, the Acampada in Spain, 2011, Occupy Wall Street, Tahrir Square in Egypt, 3-4 years of Occupy everywhere. In those years, I was thinking, I'm not a political strategist. I'm very bad as a political strategist. I work from a metaphor to the other. The metaphors are my job, in a sense. And my metaphor was, first of all, what is the subject, the subjectivity, the social subjectivity that has the potency for the transformation of the global machine? and my answer was, and still is, cognitarians, cognitive workers, people who work in the field of computer programming and of medical therapy, people who work in the field of art and in the field of engineering, intellectuals who are no more intellectual but cognitive workers. They have been and are the creators of the machines, the programmers of the machine. They are the only who possess the key for dismantling the machine and reprogramming the machine itself. So cognitarian subjectivation means that at the very end, it's not a democratic problem. I mean, I don't expect the majority of the population will be able. I'm frank. I don't believe in democracy as the solution of every problem. I like democracy. Why not? But it's only a methodology among many. What I like very much, what I think is the more powerful sphere of activity is the sphere of intellectual creation of the world, of mental, of cognitive creation of the world. So I don't speak to the majority of the population. I love everybody, but my interlocutor are the cognitive workers, those who work inside the machine who have the power of dismantling and reprogramming it. So in 2011, my idea was that the true problem is that cognitive workers are suffering very much from their conditions. I mean, those people who are obliged to spend 10 hours per day and more in front of a screen working for a big machine in exchange of a salary which is generally not enough for going to the beach and for paying the rent. I mean, those people are suffering, most of all are suffering at the level of their mind, of their psyche. So let's organize this kind of suffering. Let's start from the separation of the mind from the body and of the body from the mind. Let's start from this and let's occupy. Occupy is not politically relevant. What are you occupying? The street? There is nothing in the streets. There is nothing in the public building. Also in the banks. There is nothing. The real power is not in the bank. The real power is in the financial cyberspace. And you cannot occupy the financial cyberspace. It totally escapes to our reach. So what can we do? We can withdraw. We can take back our bodies and our minds. And so occupy takes a totally different meaning. Not occupying because in that place there is the power and you take power. No, occupy because in that place our bodies meet. Our bodies erotically meet and find the pleasure of being together, of talking in a crazy way in the streets about everything, about sex and about computer programming, about our pleasure and our suffering, and about our jobs and about our salary and so on. So the important thing of Occupy was the meeting of bodies, the re-erotization of the public space. I was in that period, I was teaching in Beirut. So my students came from Egypt. And those people were not talking politics. They were talking the pleasure of being together in the street, men and women, for the first time freely in a square. Well, as we know, Occupy did not have a positive effect at the very end. I think that Occupy has been the beginning of a long process that we are in. Also nowadays, we are in the same process. The process of autonomization of the body from isolation and of the mind from the cognitive automaton. This is the only process that can create the conditions for a new social organization, for a new liberation.
Yeah, I'm even just thinking about the first chapter of The Second Coming. You talk about the way research and the Research Institute has been dominated by the neoliberal sort of ruling order, right? And which, let's say 20, 30 years ago was much more clearly seen as the state. And today we can think about techno-capital and techno-finance as in some ways more powerful than the state. It checks the state, it challenges the state, right? I think of that photo of Mark Zuckerberg sitting in front of 1,000 cameras testifying to Congress, and he's invincible, these cameras. It's almost like a flip of the cover of Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle. It's the other side. But, and just today I was reading an article about a research institute in Budapest that has been completely taken over, or is in the process of being completely taken over by Orban. And they're saying that the research here must only be for the good of the state, for the good of the right-wing nationalist, fascist state. So it's not just that there isn't a space to occupy. The question is, what do we refuse? Right? Are we refusing work for X party? Are we refusing the state in general? How do we activate a politics? And when I say politics, I mean a lowercase p in the streets politics via our own cognitarian labor, let's say.
The autonomy of research, of education in general, of school, of university, but particularly of research, the autonomy of research is the most important thing in our time. The entire economic and financial machine is organized, directed by those people who have the ability to research and to program intellectually the machine. So, in the years of Occupy, the idea, the central idea was that the financial takeover is destroying autonomy of the university and of research. Actually, this is what has happened in the last years. Research is more and more subjected to the interests of big corporations and more subjected to the military or to dictators like Orban. The military and the big corporations are, in a sense, the same body of power. So autonomy of research is the key. But it's this is a little bit hard to say, because actually the effect of the destruction of the public school, the definancement, the financial cuts in the field of education has led to a growing dependency of research from capitalism. I think that our main political problem for the future is creating institutions for autonomous research. It's not easy, because it is, first of all, a problem of having the tools for that. So I think that I remember the industrial workers in the 60s and in the 70s. They started destroying the factory and taking over the factories. So many things changed for the good. The workers' power in the 60s and in the 70s was an important effect, starting from the place of work. We have to do the same nowadays. We have to talk with the workers of Google, the workers of Facebook, the workers of the big corporation of research. We have to propose to them to recover their autonomy, their pleasure of life. We have to look at the eyes of those communitarian workers and tell them, you are depressed, you are suffering, you don't sleep at night. I know that because it's clear in your face. The only way to recover is starting a process of erotic solidarity with your colleagues. And erotic solidarity means rebellion, means destruction of the chain, of the machine, is creation of a programming and creation of a new machine for the autonomy for the public good.
Well, we've seen in the last couple of years, and there's room to be skeptical, of course, but movements to organize tech workers, and not just in the States, but elsewhere. And we've seen in recent fights against giants like Amazon and Google and minor victories. But what I'm...
Not only that, I want to emphasize what happened in Google some months ago. Google was creating an alliance with the Pentagon.
Right.
And an engineer...
Massive rebellion.
A woman, an engineer, wrote a letter to her colleague saying, I will resign, I will go away if Google becomes a tool in the hands of the criminals of the Pentagon. And she won because 4,000 workers of Google, not so many because 4,000 is 5% of the workers, but anyway, 4,000 people signed the letter, and at a point Google has been obliged to go back, to recede, to stop the alliance with the Pentagon. I know that it's not the solution of the problems because some other corporation will give to the Pentagon the killing tools they need. But it's a beginning, the beginning of solidarity, withdrawal, and the creation of a space of autonomy inside the machine itself.
And the other incredible thing about the example you just brought up and elsewhere is that it's vertical organization, right? So you had workers in Amazon fulfillment centers in Minnesota walking out, predominantly workers from Somalia. You had people in Spain, in Italy, in France, staging walkouts of warehouses. You have people in various startups on the East Coast staging sit-ins. Like, this is incredible. But my question to you, and I'd like to go back to the past for the end of the podcast, is to talk just a little bit about the 2 decades of '68 in Italy. Specifically, you started university in 1968.
Yeah.
Enrolled in the Institute of Philosophy in Bologna, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk a little bit about this decade? These 2 decades.
The 2 decades, because actually in my mind, that period starts in Berkeley, when Mario Savio speaks and says a very, very interesting talk where he says the capitalist corporations are stealing our brain, our intellectual activity. I refuse this. And he was calling to a peaceful revolution of students, but students means cognitive workers in a sense. That message spread all over in the world. In Italy, the movement, our 68 has been a decade-long 68. It started in the universities, but also in the factories like Fiat. And the main object, the main subject of that movement was the alliance between workers who refuse exploitation, who refuse salaried work, and students, intellectuals, who have the ability to transform the machine. So that alliance made possible a long period of freedom, of happiness, for 10 years. We have had the possibility of meeting every day people who were happy thanks to the process of the movement itself. Then it lasted. In Italy, the movement reached its peak in the year 1977. 77 is an interesting year in Italy, but also in many other places of the world. It's the year when Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs create the Apple trademark. It's the year when Sex Pistols in London say no future, no future. But it is also the year when in Italy a movement of many students and young workers started saying, we want to create a world free from exploitation. And that was a very strong beginning of a movement that is not finished now. Unfortunately, I must say, I took part in that movement and I had some responsibility in it. And if I think to that period and to the conclusion of that period, I must say that we have made a huge mistake at the end. I have been in 77 after months of insurrection in Rome, in Bologna, in Milano, in Padova, in Naples, and so on. The police arrested hundreds of students and of workers. At that point, I flew to Paris because I was wanted by the police. And at that point, we decided to launch a conference, a European conference. And we called it the rebels of many countries of Europe to Bologna, which was, in a sense, the center of that insurrection. We made an enormous mistake, the worst mistake of my life. We called people to come to a conference against repression. Repression was a true thing, was important, I don't deny that, but we have been wrong calling people to speak against depression. Our task in that moment was to speak about the future. We had to call people to Bologna not to speak about the repression, but to speak about the future imagination, the imagination of the future. I don't think that we would not have avoided Ronald Reagan in the US and Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, but we would have not avoided the neoliberal counter-revolution and all that, but we would have been able to launch a message to the future generation of rebels. We have been unable to do that. And this is the thing that I consider as a sort of personal fault that I repent of. My English is not perfect sometimes.
It's fantastic. I mean, I do want to say, just to close this out, that of course, we're talking about a country, specifically with Italy, that had 33% of the nation vote for the Communist Party in the 70s. And this movement that you took part in that did say something to the future, right? I completely understand what you're saying. And of course, we wouldn't have avoided the death of Aldo Moro and the police repression that followed and the years of Berlusconi and now Cinque Stelle and Salvini and what we're seeing in the rest of Europe. But what I do want to say is that today, at least in places like Italy and Spain, in Greece, even though maybe occupation as a tactic, as you said earlier, is not where we should be pointing our eyes, perhaps, but there is a use of space and a use of media by young people, by students, and by workers. And what you were able to do in Bologna, to bring together the workers and the students, this is probably the biggest thing that we should strive for, even today. And so I just wondering if, to finish the podcast, you could talk about Radio Alice and the way you used this radio station that you co-founded to do this job, to bring together students, workers, cognitarians of all types.
You know, in our time, in the 70s, in Italy, in Europe in general, and everywhere, although the media situation was very different in the United States. Anyway, the game was easy. It was easy because in the field of media, in that period, we are living in a desert. If you had a TV or a radio, you only could listen to the voice of power of the state. The mediascape was a desert. So when Radio Alice started speaking and saying strange things, reading poems of Mayakovsky, calling people to sleep together in the square of the city, and so on. It was a big scandal, provoking an effect of solidarity and of liberation of the speech. Now the game is much more difficult because once upon a time the enemy was censorship. Now the enemy is white noise. Now the real problem is the term sheet, the excess of information. So in a metaphorical way, I would say that the problem now is not so much to add one more voice to the many voices that are filling the mediascape. The problem would be to create a moment of silence. How can we be able to provoke an effect of blackout of the white noise? How can we be able to create a condition for listening to the whispering of the voice of young women singing in the night? I know it's something of utopian, purely metaphorical. I know. But the problem is not only, to the young people who create new radios, I say, do it, go ahead, don't be afraid of the shitstorm. But the real problem is not to speak more. The real problem is to create the conditions of silence, of spiritual, of mental, of bodily silence, so that we can rediscover what is really essential for our life, for our desire.
I think maybe we should take note of that and
be silent now.
Thank you so much, Bifo. Thank you for coming.